This is Tomatsu Man, and I'm back again with another character cram. So, today we're talking about Valiant Comics' Unstoppable Soldier, Bloodshot. His closest comparison to the mainstream comics is Wolverine. However, when we start breaking down his actual abilities, you'll see he's actually more in line with Marvel Universe's symbiote, but we'll get there. Think of him like Agent Venom with a much more significant healing factor and the unhinged mind of the Punisher. He's kind of like a inverted glass cannon of the Valiant universe. He's fairly easy to put down, but it's almost impossible to keep him down. Bloodshot never stops coming for you. Today we're going to talk about what I consider to be the definitive version of the character, which is the Bloodshot from the 2012 Valiant reboot. However, there are a few caveats in that I think Bloodshot is one of the few characters that still borrows heavily from his older incarnations, especially the 1992 one. And because so much of Bloodshot's new origins are shrouded in mystery, I believe aspects of his origin should still be considered canon until proven otherwise. So I will touch on those older origins in this video and let you decide for yourself. So who is Bloodshot and where does he come from? Bloodshot is a cyborg imbued with nanites that give him multiple abilities, created as part of a US government-backed super soldier program called Rising Spirit. I know some of you are probably as confused as I was to see that Bloodshot is an American super soldier, given that he's a walking Japanese flag, with Project Rising Spirit being a clear allusion to the land of the rising sun, which is Japan. And this is where I bring in his 1992 origin, which has rarely been referenced since 2012, where the character was soft rebooted, but actually still slots in pretty easily, and I think it brings context to his whole design. So I will explain, and I will tell you where it slots into the 2012 origin. So, the original 1992 version of Bloodshot was an Italian hitman named Angelo Mortali. Already with his ties to the mob and Hitman, you can see some of the Punisher influence seeping through the cracks there. Mortali was an excellent hitman who was framed for murder after cheating on his wife-to-be, and he was framed by his fiance's brother, who had him abducted into the Rising Spirit program to get back at him for what he did to his sister. The lead scientist at Rising Spirit and the creator of the nanites that made Bloodshot what he is was Hideyoshi Iwatsu, who is clearly of Japanese descent. Hideyoshi was corrupt and likely intended to use Bloodshot as a weapon to service Japanese interests instead of Americans' ones. And I'm basing this implication on the Rai comics, which actually involves characters who are descendants of Bloodshot who have his original nanites, who serve as heroes in Japan, implying to me that the ultimate goal and intention of Hideyoshi was to transfer this super soldier to Japan for Japanese interests. This would explain why Bloodshot develops his red scarring and white complexion and looks exactly like the Japanese flag. Given that Bloodshot has shapeshifting capabilities but no stated time duration that the shapeshifting can be held, the only true explanation for the color shift is that it's intended to be a reference to that Japanese flag by the scientist that created him. While the current incarnation of Bloodshot doesn't typically reference Hideyoshi, as a Dr. Emmanuel Kuretich is primarily credited for creating the current Bloodshot, we know that he is not the first Bloodshot, and this allows the 1992 origin to still slot in and allows the current Bloodshot to just be the most perfected version of the Bloodshot cyborg instead of being the first. And personally, that makes a lot of sense to me. Otherwise, you have to headcanon your way out of Bloodshot's current white and red design as being more coincidental than something symbolic of something else. And that, in my head, just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a weird coincidence. So what do we know about the modern Bloodshot? The modern Bloodshot is a nanite-infused super soldier experiment like his counterpart. This Bloodshot, however, does not know his true identity. Originally, he believes he is Ray Garrison, a soldier with a wife and kid back home. After a mission in Iran that was set up to kill an innocent militia, Bloodshot is captured by Kuretich, who reveals to him that he is not Raymond Garrison at all. In fact, he has been filled with dozens of false lives and memories that Project Rising Spirit used to control him, including the Angelo Mortali persona. These implanted lives allow Bloodshot with extra combat experience by giving him the lives of multiple experienced soldiers who know different martial arts and allowing him to be calm and deadly in intense situations, while also giving Rising Spirit many fake family members they can use to motivate Bloodshot to do essentially anything they ask. They will often claim that his family is in danger or captured by targets to give Bloodshot the extra motivation he needs to take down his target. They'll also invoke whatever personality is more fit for the situation they put him in. If they need a more cold-blooded killer, they'll do that. If they need a calmer killer who's going to assess the situation, they'll use a personality that better fits that profile. He's even been manipulated on multiple occasions to kill innocent people through this mental manipulation, and his handlers convincing him that harmless people are actually his targets. After Kuretich deprograms him from the Rising Spirit program, he reveals that the previous Bloodshot went insane when implanted with the multiple lives and had to be killed. The current Bloodshot was the successful replacement that was still stable even after confronting the multiple personalities. And even after learning he has no clear history, Bloodshot remained sane and he begins to search for the truth of his past. Though to date, no true origin has been found for the current Bloodshot, giving him the moniker of Everyman in reference to the multiple personalities he embodies. And this aspect clearly takes some inspiration from the many lives of Wolverine in Marvel Comics. If you're not familiar with this, Wolverine is over 200 years old and has served in multiple wars, and it's been retconned many times, but essentially he forgot a lot of those past lives that he's lived. Though currently, of course, Wolverine is aware of all those past lives. But at one point, he didn't know he had spent a lot of time in Japan, as well as Canada and the US, living pretty fulfilling lives in each country that he's lived in, creating a lot of nuance to his backstory. And Bloodshot is pulling from that same line of thought, pulling in aspects of the past lives to create interesting stories based on the true origins of these fake personas he comes up with. For example, with one run-in for a past wife that he was able to track down, and it turns out this wife simply knew the scientist who made him and had no further connection to him. And this leads to Bloodshot learning a bit more about his creators, and they weave the past lives in like that, creating more context for who he is and why. Once Bloodshot eyes are open to the multiple lives within him, it allows him to break free of Project Rising Spirit's control, and his stories essentially evolve him acting as a free agent of justice most of the time. Bloodshot has a soft spot for kids and anyone underprivileged, and that's what leads him to being involved with the liberation of multiple Sayat children, and eventually saving them from Toyo Harada's influence. While he has tried to live a quiet life several times, he is usually drawn back in by the desire to eliminate other super soldiers like himself, and there are several other plot lines of him eliminating other US super soldier projects. This selflessness is actually one of my favorite qualities of Bloodshot. He's a man with no past, and yet when outside of the influence of the people that want to use him, he chooses to fight evil. Not because he has to, but because he can. It's strange, but in the Valiant universe, Bloodshot is probably one of the truest heroes in the traditional sense of the word. Characters like Ninjak fight for profit, the Shadow Man fights for an inherited obligation, and Exo Man of War fights for honor and a sense that the world is his subjects. Bloodshot simply fights because he thinks the other guy is in the wrong and needs to be put down. And that makes him a lot like Punisher in the best way. Like the Punisher, he fights villainy with no compromise. And the only way to keep him down is to kill him, and that's a lot harder to make stick than it is for the Punisher. But let's talk about what enables him to be such an effective hero, and in turn his power set, and that is his nanites. The current Bloodshot's relationship with his nanites is quite interesting. After Bloodshot gains the knowledge of the multiple lives, his nanites begin to take the forms of the significant others implanted in his memories, often portraying themselves as children or various lovers he's had in those memories. These forms they take are only visible to Bloodshot, so when conversing with people, they say it's like he's talking to ghosts. They give Bloodshot motivation to keep fighting when the odds are against him like their original purpose, but they also give him suggestions and advice in battle in this form. This gives the nanites a nice familiar bond with Bloodshot, and gives him a ghostly sidekick that's always with Bloodshot, like a more somber Batman and Robin relationship, given that the forms the nanites takes were likely never real, and if they were likely never really a part of the current Bloodshot's life. Kind of a sad undertone, but it's also kind of heartwarming because you get this sense that his nanites have this affection for him as much as he needs him. So how do these nanites help him? Now let's get into his powers because they are actually kind of crazy. So Bloodshot is a cyborg, and all of his abilities come from the nanites. His most used and iconic ability is his healing factor. Much like Wolverine, he can heal from essentially any wound with ease, and he even has a resistance to poison and radiation as his body immediately starts to repair itself as it breaks down. His ability is on the surface level more limited than Wolverine's healing factor, as the requirement for his body to be repaired is that he needs protein to convert into energy to fuel his regeneration, so he can't simply regenerate infinitely if there's nothing to fuel it. This protein can come from food or any organic matter. He has healed his bodies by deconstructing cows, and in extreme cases, even human bodies aren't off limits, as any raw material to fuel his healing factor is up for grabs, and it's somewhat implied that the only thing limiting him from using live bodies is his morals. When Bloodshot does die, his nanites can leave his body to find fuel to rebuild him, so he can be dead for quite some time and still make a full recovery as long as his nanites find adequate sources of protein. His nanites are self-replicating, so destroying all the nanites is easier said than done. Being a cyborg, Bloodshot's biggest weaknesses are EMPs, but as long as any surviving nanite gets power again, it's very likely they can replicate and fully reconstruct Bloodshot if he's killed during a blackout, as he has been affected by EMPs before, and the second the EMPs stop, his nanites rebuild them. Easy as that. The nanites also give them a host of other abilities. Unlike the previous Bloodshots, the current version has limited shape-shifting capabilities for stealth. For an undetermined amount of time, Bloodshot can change his skin and his face composition to blend into almost any environment, similar to how a symbiote can shapeshift in Marvel. Bloodshot's nanites also reinforce his body, giving him limited super strength and above average speed. Though he rarely uses this ability, Bloodshot even has a hypersonic scream that he can use when fully incapacitated to stun his enemies. Similar to Wolverine, he has enhanced detection abilities as well, because his nanites are constantly monitoring his surroundings and can detect objects from several miles away. And the nanites give him this detected information in their ghostly forms, keeping Bloodshot up to date on incoming danger or threats. His final ability is a limited technopathy enabled by the nanites. They can interface with cars and computers to draw out information, manipulate locks, or turn system off and on at Bloodshot's whim. This often gives Bloodshot an edge against other tech-based enemies. These abilities have put Bloodshot in the upper mid-tier of the Valiant universe. He's taken out multiple powered beings by himself, but there are many others who are far stronger and faster than him in the verse. He isn't a realistic threat for someone like Exo Man of War or the Shadow Man. No matter how many times he comes back, it's not really feasible that he could beat them in a truly fair fight. And that makes him, like I said, a reverse glass cannon. He can only dish out as much as the weapon he has on hand, but it's really hard to keep him out of a fight, so it's fun to see him overcome the odds and pull out a win in his comics. To this day, Bloodshot is a character still filled with a lot of mysteries. It's unclear if they will ever give him a true origin, but he's definitely a fun character to read, and he's a bit of a tragic character that you want to root for to have a happy ending. If you're a fan of the brutal versions of Punisher and Wolverine, I definitely think you should check out Bloodshot's comics, because they fall on that brand of over-the-top action and destruction. And for reading recommendations, I say pick up Bloodshot Unleashed, which is the currently running comic for mature readers, but I also just suggest checking out Bloodshot Deluxe Edition, which collects Bloodshot's comics from 2012 up to issue 13. And that'll give you pretty much everything you need to know about the character, and it's a great place to start. And yeah, that's essentially the video. Again, I want to thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. And tell me down below if there's another comic character from a different verse you want to hear about. I'm always looking for ideas, and hey, thanks again.